The TV in the attic. I found an old dust-riddled TV in the attic of the home me and my family just moved into today. It was just sitting in the middle of the attic. Nothing else around it. Nothing else in the entire house, as a matter of fact. It was quite strange. Who just leaves a TV and nothing else, I thought. As I approached the old 1983 Zenith, I noticed a notebook that sat on top. I reached down and picked it up. I flipped back the cover, and on the first page it read, "To whom it may concern, read carefully the information inside the pages of this book that I've collected, for they could save you and your loved ones, and whatever you do, please don't turn on the television that lies before you." As I stumbled through the pages, I noticed pictures of families and drawings of demonic symbols. I was becoming quite disturbed at this point, so I decided to close the notebook and read it carefully. Later in the night, when my wife and kids went to bed, I tucked the notebook under my arm, headed downstairs, and helped bring in the rest of our things. After we got everything squared away and put in its place, we ordered some pizza, ate. Then I put the kids to bed and kissed my wife goodnight. I told her I'd be in a little later after I finished up some work in the study. I went in and locked the door to the study behind me, sat down and pulled the notebook from the bottom desk drawer and placed it in front of me. It read like instructions on how to put the most difficult of toys together on Christmas morning. The details and information that was collected was outstanding. It turns out the notebook was written by the home's previous owner, and after the strange disappearances of his family, he set out and tried to find out what happened. He revealed that the television was sitting in the attic alone when he and his family moved into the house as well, and strange things didn't start happening until it was plugged in and turned on. Almost instantly, strange things started to happen when the television was turned on. It made a loud, deafening pop when he first switched it on, then an eerie, bone-chilling breeze that emanated from upstairs and wafted throughout the living room. Next came the loud noises that could be heard from up in the attic whenever somebody turned the TV on, that sounded like footsteps all across the attic floor. Then came the distant chanting whenever the TV was switched on. It almost sounded cult-like, which all led to his family acting peculiar and changing before his very eyes. Their moods and personalities completely changed. They became despondent, glossy-eyed, catatonic, if you will, almost if they were possessed. Then, not long after they started to change, they disappeared, always last being seen watching the television. He was devastated, but had to find out what happened to his family. He did painstaking research about the history of his home and its inhabitants, and made countless calls, tracked down any surviving family members of the past residents, and interviewed as many locals that would speak with him. He found that this exact thing that was happening to him and his family had happened to the previous 5 families that owned the home, and that the original owners met a grisly end in their own right. And another disturbing detail was that the TV was always involved in every single case. It belonged to the original family that owned the home. He found out through family members that knew. It sat upstairs in the attic, which was also the family rec room at the time, and sat in the middle of the room when the entire family was sacrificed by a cult they were trying to save their daughter from. The family was massacred and strewn around the attic, blood everywhere, including all over the television where demonic symbols were drawn on the backs and sides, and on the screen, written in Latin, that was transcribed saying, "For whomever turns on this screen will awaken our master and will usher him into our earthly realm, and whomever watches what is on the screen will become an unshakable servant. Ex-police officers who were at the scene of the murders that he interviewed say the television was removed as evidence, but somehow disappeared and made its way back to the house and has been present with every family that moves in since. And every family slowly disappears, just like the previous one. He then finishes up with a list of things to do to try and avoid the same fate as the previous families. 1. Don't turn the television on. Don't even plug it into the wall. Seems self-evident there, pal, I thought. 2. If the television does get turned on, do not watch the screen and immediately turn off the TV and leave the premises at once. And 3. If the television has been turned on and someone has watched it, don't let that person out of your sight. You may be able to protect them. Please don't let them disappear. He then closes with a bunch of incoherent sentences, then writing the same word over and over again, like he was losing his mind, and finish with a barely legible, "Help me." I closed the notebook, trembling, not knowing what to believe. I started thinking back at how our purchasing of this house transpired. Yes, it was on the cheaper side, which I can see why now. And come to think about it, the realtor did seem to dodge the question when we asked why would the previous owners get rid of such a beautiful home. My head was spinning at this point. I decided to go to bed and figure out what to do in the morning. I slept horribly, having terrible nightmares about the television and one of my kids turning it on. I decided the first thing I would do when I got out of bed and dressed is throw the TV away before it was too late. I got my clothes on and made my way downstairs to the kitchen. I heard my wife and kids already up, making breakfast in the kitchen. I walked in and greeted their smiling, happy faces. I sat down at the table and started to eat. Just then my daughter giggled and said, "Daddy, look what Mommy found." I looked at her, and she was pointing at the living room over my shoulder. I turned and was horrified at what my eyes were staring at. I could hear my wife say, "Yes, I found this old television in the attic. I plugged it in, and it worked. So I decided to bring it down for the kids to watch. Isn't it great?" The Cold Case of Martha. Author unknown. I've been wanting to tell this story for a while, but I never got the nerve to, until now. Growing up, I had a childhood friend named Brian. Changed it for the sake of this post. Brian and I grew really close because we were, as he described, misfits. We never fit in with any of the other groups of people, and because of that, we had a great understanding of each other. During my freshman year of high school, I had history class with Brian. We had a project on creating our family tree. We each had to make our own, and Brian invited me over to his house to work on the project. Brian invited me to his house so I could help him on the design element. Brian was never really a good designer or an arts and crafts kind of guy. I would always help him design and put together his projects. One time, he was creating an animal cell for biology. He molded the different structures in the cell with clay and put it on a styrofoam ball. Everything fell apart, and from that point on, he asked me to help him design his projects. Anyways, I went to his house and he was working on gathering the information for his family tree. Lucky for him, his family was close-knit. They had a notebook that had every family member listed. The notebook was divided into two parts: people on Brian's mom's side and people on Brian's dad's side. Each family member had their own page and methods of contact. For some family members, there were notes about the individual. Brian let me scroll through the notebook, and there was one page that was really out of the ordinary. The page was dedicated to this girl named Martha. Martha's page was literally blank. Her name was at the top of the page, and that was it. I asked Brian about who Martha was. Brian stared at Martha's page for a long time. He looked at the page with a blank expression and looked frozen in thought. It took a good 5 minutes before he said, "I don't know. I really don't." He told me he would ask his parents when they have some spare time. Both his parents worked. He was home alone most of the time. I left Brian's house after helping him on his project, and this Martha girl scared the crap out of me. There was something off about this girl. She was the only person in the book with a blank page. She was on Brian's dad's side of the family and shared the same last name as Brian. Who is she, and why was her page blank? It took a month before Brian talked about Martha again. Brian told me his parents were just as confused as him. They contacted everyone that was listed in the notebook, and no one knew who Martha was. No one had one iota of info on Martha. Now, this was intriguing. I really wanted to know who Martha was. Brian told me that the page may have been set up as a prank. Deep down inside, I had a feeling it wasn't. Her page was there, so there has to be a reason behind the madness. Brian and I never talked about Martha again until the last day we met before going our separate ways for college. It was an ordinary day. We were going to go to the movies and the arcade to hang out. Brian brought up the Martha girl during lunch. I was surprised Brian brought it up, because at this point it had been 3.5 years since her name was mentioned. Brian told that a couple of weeks ago he received a package from a person named Martha, and the return address was from an apartment complex in New York. He also mentioned that a map of New York and a set of keys were included in the package. Someone in Brian's family knew who Martha was. It was the only logical way, in my mind, for this situation to play out. Brian told me he put in a leave of absence for his upcoming quarter in college, and he would go to New York to investigate things for himself. He said his parents were very supportive of his decision and that he would text me during his trip. Brian did text me for the first 3 days. His trip he booked was 2 weeks. During his first 3 days, he would text me pictures of New York and the landmarks. He decided to do some sightseeing, and it didn't surprise me. Brian and I had never really explored anywhere past where we live. Both of us never visited any of the other states or traveled out of the country. This trip was something new for Brian, and he really wanted to make the most of it. However, on the 4th day, he stopped texting me. The 5th day was the same as the 4th day. I started texting him back, hoping he would answer back. I got no response. For the rest of the 2 weeks, Brian didn't respond to my texts. 2 weeks later, I received a rather large package. It was from Martha, and I flipped out. So many thoughts were running in my head. Who is this girl? How did she get my address? Hours passed by. I didn't want to open it, but something pushed me to. I regretted that decision. Inside this package was a rather large styrofoam box. Inside the styrofoam box was Brian's head. My grandmother warned me about mirrors. Unknown author. I'm sharing an experience of mine in hopes that maybe other people have had the same thing happen to them and have more knowledge of what it is. Allow me to describe myself. I'm Hispanic, but I don't really participate or dig into my culture much. Unfortunately, my family is more involved with our culture than I am, so occasionally I do participate in some holidays or celebrations. When I was young, my parents would drop my siblings and I off at our grandmother's house, due to both of them working long hours. My grandmother was a kind, yet fragile old woman who knew more Spanish than she knew English. Although she didn't have cable or anything of entertainment, we enjoyed going because of the folklore she shared with us. Like familiar tales, such as La Llorona, we would listen attentively with such fascination. My grandmother was a peculiar woman, though. It never came to attention to any of my siblings, nor I, about the lack of mirrors in her house. Only when a cousin of ours had visited my grandmother was it pointed out. When asked by my cousin if there were any mirrors in the house, my grandmother sternly told her, no, and not to be so vain about yourself. My cousin then asked her why she didn't have any. My grandmother responded saying, I have my reasons. I guess this answer satisfied my cousin because she didn't probe any longer. After hearing this, I too noticed that there weren't any mirrors in the house at all. This made me curious, so I asked my grandmother what her reasons were for not having any. She was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee when I asked this. I still remember the grave look she had on her face when I asked. Mijo, she said, listen to me, and don't forget what I am about to tell you. There is an evil thing that lives in the mirror. It can be any mirror in any place. It's always there waiting, but you'll never see it. It shows itself when it sees something that it likes, and when that happens, it comes out of the mirror to take whatever it is. As she said this, my skin broke out in goosebumps, and the room suddenly felt a lot colder than it was. As I've said before, I've listened to my grandmother tell many other stories and folklore, but none of them were like this. My grandmother looked serious, and her tone was very stern. I realized that this wasn't a story, but a warning. How do you know about it? I asked her. For a second, she stared into space and seemed to daze off. Then she focused her eyes on me and said, Go play with your brother and sister. I began to protest and was demanding an answer. She told me to behave and took off her sandal. Upon seeing this, I immediately ran away from the kitchen and out the screen door to the front yard, where my siblings were playing. After that, it seemed to escape my mind, and I never brought it up again with my grandmother. Unfortunately, I'll never get an answer to how my grandmother knew about such a thing, as she had passed away when I was 11. I want to say that maybe it was just another piece of folklore that had been told to her before, but I know now that that isn't the case. Earlier tonight, I was brushing my teeth in the bathroom and was just about finished. My sink is located right next to the door, along with the light switch. I have a habit of turning off the light before exiting the bathroom, leaving me in the darkness for a second or two. Nothing out of the ordinary has happened before, until tonight. I turned off the light as usual and was about to exit when something in front of me caught my eye. In the darkness, I saw a faintly illuminated face in the reflection of my mirror. I was immediately startled and quickly turned the light on. There was nothing but my terrified reflection. I felt a sense of confusion because I could have sworn that there was something there. So I chalked it up to being nothing and proceeded to turn the light off again. I saw it more clearly this time. I had only had the light off for maybe a second or so. But believe me when I say this, the faintly illuminated face resembled a woman's face. The eye sockets seemed dark and deep, with no eyes. The face was emotionless at first. Then suddenly, it formed a huge grin. I immediately turned the light on and ran out of the restroom, stumbled into the hallway, and into my bedroom, where I proceeded to lock my door and jump into my bed, covering myself with my blanket. I know what you're thinking. Why didn't you just run out of the house or go to the kitchen to grab a knife or something? Well, understand, I was scared out of my mind and acted on impulse. My mind was running at 100 miles an hour, and I was having all these thoughts. I thought about calling the police and saying that there was someone in my house, but I was too scared to uncover myself at the time. Suddenly, the memory of my grandmother telling me about the thing in the mirror rushed into my head. My heart sank, and I began to tell myself that what my grandmother said has nothing to do with this. I mustered up some courage and reached out my arm from underneath the blanket to the little lamp next to my bed. I felt around and found the little switch and turned the lamp on. When I saw the familiar light through the blanket, I slowly uncovered myself and looked around the room. There's no mirrors in my room, I thought. My mind kept going back to my grandmother's words. I'm beginning to calm down now and decided to browse the web for help. Nothing's turned up, and as for now, I'm still locked in my room. If anyone out there has experienced anything like this before, or has knowledge of what this thing is, please contact me. As I type this, I can faintly hear something that sounds like glass being tapped on from down the hall. My Sister Was Kidnapped 3 years ago by Evan the Nerd, 83. My sister, my little sister Sarah, so beautiful, so perfect, so innocent, was kidnapped late one dark night 3 years ago. Her bedspread was all over the floor. She had struggled. The police were called, but they found no evidence, no fingerprints, no blood, nothing. Just a heartbroken family and a little girl missing. They said that she was taken by a mastermind, a genius-level criminal who had worn gloves and who had moved quickly. They gave up after a month of searching. They looked everywhere, the house, the neighborhood, the town, everywhere. Well, everywhere they knew of. You see, was the only one who knew about the basement. My parents didn't even know until they disobeyed me. It was hidden underneath the house, the door hidden by a rug. I found it when I was a little kid. The dark had frightened me, yet I didn't care. I never told my parents. No one aside from me knew that we had a basement. I only used it at night, when I knew for sure that my parents were asleep. I was careful. They were suspicious of me, since I started to spend much more time down there than up here. When they asked me where I was going, I told them I was in my room. They didn't buy it. They found the door and went down into the basement, finding me and her together. Mom screamed so loud and my father just stared at me. I hate people staring at me. The basement is where I keep her. I know where she is, and I also know what happened. I was the one who took her. I worked so quietly. She tried to scream, but I covered her mouth with my hands, the leather physically separating my flesh and hers. I put her in the basement, and I've kept her there since. She went into a deep sleep 1 year later, just closed her eyes and never woke up. She's just taking a rest. I'm sure of it. They were so scared when I grabbed the knife and tried to run up the steps. I was too quick for them, though. Sure, they were my parents, and Mom suffered immense pain from giving birth to me. But they found Sarah, and they had to be punished. The blood is so red, it's seeping into my shoes, and it's staining my hands. Their bodies are lying in a pool of their own blood at my feet. Oh, I can feel something rolling down my cheeks. It's cold. Oh, tears. That's a new one. I know what to do with the bodies. I can just keep them downstairs in the basement. I'll just clean up the blood, undress them both, and use my taxidermy kit. Maybe we can be a family again. Maybe we can stay together forever. Oh, Sarah. Oh, my baby sister, Sarah. Please, wake up. The Stone Well, author unknown. In the year 1883, there lived the Clark family, a simple family of 3, in a tiny town named Dresden, Kansas. The small community had a population of 34 at the time. Joseph was an only child, and since there wasn't another 9-year-old within miles of their farm, he would have to invent his games. His father had built him toys made of wood and paint over the years, hoping to bring some joy to the son he loved and cared for most. Even to a 9-year-old child with a good imagination and an unquenchable thirst for adventure, Joseph needed more. Jonathan surprised his son with 2 tin cans connected by a string. He told Joseph to take one end and run in the opposite direction until the line was tight. It was a good 30 feet long. Jonathan yelled to Joseph to put the can to his ear and listen. He was able to hear his father's voice say, "Hello," as if he were standing right next to him. Eventually, after Joseph had exhausted almost every idea of what to do with the cans, he thought he'd drop one can down into the stone well on the edge of their property. How exciting this was for Joseph to hear what it sounds like down at the bottom of a well. What mysteries lay down there? Does something scary live down there in the dark? One cold morning, Jonathan awoke early with a sense of unease. Joseph's bed was empty. Without shoes or a coat, he raced out into the front yard and shouted Joseph's name. In a panic, he thought of the only place his son could be, and that was the well. A single tin can lay where Joseph usually sat. His son never wandered off far from the property. The stones that created the sides of the well were much too high for a 9-year-old to fall in. After weeks of searching, the Clark family gave up. Joseph's disappearance was going to remain a mystery to his parents forever. The following spring, Jonathan was out working when the tin can caught his eye, lying 5 feet from the well. Setting down the junk in his arms, he raised the tin can to his mouth and whispered, "Joseph, I love you so much." He waited a few seconds before moving it to his ear, with the slightest hope that he would hear his son's voice echo through the can. All he heard was the sound of the other tin can tapping against the stone walls of the well, which was soon followed by silence. He felt slight tension on the string attached to the can before a soft voice spoke in his ear.
"He's much happier with us."
He quickly dropped the can and began pulling up the string that connected the cans. He fell back in shock when he saw there was no other tin can, just a piece of string. Sadie, written by the Prowler. My name is Pam, and I am the mother of a 5-year-old little girl named Sadie. I am a mother to 2 other children as well. Sadie was our surprise baby. See, I was told by the doctor I wouldn't be able to have any more children after my son, so we've always looked at the birth of Sadie as our little surprise blessing. There's been no difficulties, no health problems whatsoever with my little Sadie up to this point. She's always been the kindest, sweetest little girl, always sharing with her brother and sister, and always showing love and affection towards the whole family. But sadly, these past few weeks, our little Sadie's mood has become dark, even violent at times. Multiple times we've all been in the living room, me and my husband sitting on the couch, and my children sitting on the floor playing, and out of the clear blue sky, Sadie will just take one of her toys and throw it at her brother or sister. Last week, it was so bad we had to take my little boy to the hospital. Sadie had taken one of his metal toy cars and threw it right at his eye. Luckily, he won't lose it, but the doctor said it was close. It's gotten so bad now that her brother and sister won't even play with her anymore. Sadie has also started to fly into violent rages out of nowhere. She'll be told to put her toys away, or eat her food, take a nap, or even take a bath. And if she doesn't feel like doing it, she'll become violent. She'll bite, kick, scratch, and scream at the top of her lungs. She's been caught writing on the walls. Very strange writings, by the way. She's also been caught hurting our dogs. 2 days ago, we found her in the kitchen. She had the cabinet door open under the sink. She was sitting on the floor, playing with a can of lighter fluid, muttering, "Burn, burn, burn." I don't know what to do anymore. Every time she does something that just seems so evil, I ask her, "What happened to my sweet little baby girl? Why are you doing these bad, naughty things?" She just giggles and says,
"I'm not naughty, Mommy. I'm a good girl."
I asked her the same question yesterday after her latest tirade, and instead of answering me, she showed me a drawing she made, then said, "It will soon be better, Mommy." The drawing showed her standing by herself in front of the house, and behind her was our house on fire, with us trapped inside. A dark figure was standing next to the house, and it says, "All better now," written on the side. I asked her who the dark figure is. All she'll say is it's her friend. The said photo has been enclosed at the bottom of the email. Me and my husband decided to get some professional help. We've scheduled a doctor's appointment for next week. I don't think it will help, but I'm hoping. Wish us luck, everyone. Wendigo Encounter. Anonymous author. I'm not sure if this is the right place to post this, but I'm scared shitless. After hearing stories and looking stuff up online, I'm fairly sure it was a Wendigo. Me, my son, and girlfriend were attacked by something. We were camping up in the northernmost part of Washington. My girlfriend is incredibly superstitious, so she insisted we brought weapons. So I had my combat knife and a 12-gauge shotgun, and she brought a rifle alongside a newly sharpened machete. Our son was just 3 years old at the time. She and I were set on edge from a park ranger who seemed very tense and uneasy, who stopped us and instead of confiscating our weapons, told us to be careful and stay safe, then sent us along our way to the camp. When we got there, we were informed that several visitors had spoken about some unnatural noises and a pale creature that would mimic voices and sounds of people who weren't talking or seeming to be distracted. I laughed and put the idea out of my mind, thinking to myself, there's no way. They're effing with us, but I knew better. So we then reached the area we were going to set up camp. We immediately got a fire ready to light and set up our tent and bags. I fed my son as my girlfriend ate a snack. We decided to get a lay of the area, so me and my girlfriend hiked around for about an hour or so. I had one of those baby-carrying backpacks, and my son started to get heavy. Everything seemed normal until I saw something down the almost path we were on. We walked closer to investigate and saw drag marks. It looked as if someone had killed a buck. There was a whole outline in the dirt with a small dried pool of blood, as if someone grabbed it from the antlers and pulled. That wouldn't be possible for any man to do. The buck, or whatever it was, would have been way too big for that. Shaken, we rushed back to base camp and restarted the fire and hurried back into our tent. Too afraid to leave since it was dusk by now, we stayed inside the tent and my girlfriend put our son to bed. Eventually, probably from the exhaustion of fright, we fell asleep. What must have been hours later, I awoke to a faint rasping sound that sounded like a child crying. I gazed outside in confusion and saw the outline of a creature that seemed to be a buck, standing over something. It seemed to be about 20 feet away, but at a closer glance had unnaturally long limbs for a buck and was eerily tall. In sudden fear, I unloaded 2 shots into the creature and heard a loud blood-curdling cry. My girlfriend awoke screaming to the shots I had fired as I tried to explain what I had heard. To my surprise, the animal hadn't moved an inch. Then I noticed the stains on the side of the animal. It looked like blood was running down the edge, and lots of it. It stared at me deep into my eyes as I became petrified with fear. A sinister feeling of dread fell over me, as if it knew I couldn't move. I thought to myself, what if it starts to bolt towards us? Just then, this tall, decrepit, demonic thing seemed to whisper something. I couldn't exactly tell what it was saying, but it seemed to have said,
I need more children.
My girlfriend screamed, asking where our son was. We blacked out. In the morning, we awoke to park rangers at our campsite. We didn't see our son anywhere. We told the rangers that he was missing, and they started a search party. I explained what had happened, and strangely, they seemed to believe it. The one who seemed to be older, by at least a decade, pulled along the one we met earlier and whispered in his ear. I only heard a single line, and I'm not even sure if what I heard was correct. It sounded like he said, "It's getting bolder." They didn't seem to want us by ourselves, so they waited with us while they continued the search. We stayed in a log cabin for 3 days with a forest ranger, when suddenly some rangers came into the cabin saying they couldn't find our son. My girlfriend started to sob. I start to hate myself, thinking that I could have done something if I wasn't frozen in fear. We rushed outside only to find some injured and frightened police officials. The rangers wouldn't tell us anything of what happened, or what they saw, or why the cops were scared shitless. All we know is that we don't have a son anymore. God help whoever goes into that forest next. And please, please, don't bring your kids with you. Don't follow the whistling. Author unknown. As a kid growing up in Louisiana, I spent a lot of time in the woods, hunting, fishing, just standard things. There's lots of legends and tales of these woods, a lot of which come from my grandfather. Once I got old enough to travel the woods alone, he started telling me of these legends. Petey Peepon was one of them. I was old enough to believe that the story of Petey Peepon was just something he made up to mess with me. It sounded pretty ridiculous after all. He told me if I ever heard a whistling out in the woods, not to follow it, or Petey Peepon would take me away. Standard ghost story stuff. Early one morning, before the sun had risen, I was out in the woods. I was sitting on a log, waiting for the sun to come up so I could begin my squirrel hunt, listening for any sign of tree branches moving or acorns hitting the ground. It can be pretty peaceful. I used to live for those moments. The cool early morning air, the silence of the woods. It's a fantastic experience. Once the sun had come up, for me to see without the help of a light, I stood up and started to really survey the area, deciding on which direction I would go. I wasn't worried about staying close to the camp. At the time I was 14, and my dad had instilled upon me basic survival instincts. I knew to keep in mind what direction the sun was to me when I started walking, and to put it to the opposite side when I returned, depending on the time of day, of course. I had never gotten lost by doing just that. After walking a good 5 miles, stopping to bag a few squirrels along the way, I came across a small clearing and decided to rest for a minute. The woods had gotten silent, so I guessed that since nothing was moving, it would be best to stop and wait for signs of squirrels. I first heard the whistle from my right. It wasn't a whistle someone does when they're trying to get your attention, more like someone whistling a song. What kind of idiot is walking around whistling when people are trying to hunt? I heard the whistling coming closer, and I could tell whoever this was coming right where I was sitting. Out in the woods, we don't like to yell at each other, so we just make this whooping noise. It's kind of the universal
I'm over here signal. Whoop! I was hoping that whoever was coming my way would take the hint and either leave or stop whistling. At least whoop back to me. However, they did not. I couldn't hear them coming any closer, but they just kept whistling. I stand up from my log and look in the direction of the whistling. I couldn't see anyone there. Putting it off as someone who spent way too much on fancy camouflage, I decided to yell out, "Hey, I'm trying to hunt over here." Still, the whistling keeps going. Getting very irritated, I started walking towards the whistling so I could tell this idiot to shut up. I walked a good 500 yards and never saw anyone. I stopped to scratch my head and wonder if I was going crazy when I heard the whistling again, this time behind me. Now I'm thinking it's my cousin messing with me. He was next to me the night my grandfather was telling me about the things in the woods, and he knew my hunting spot. I walked back that direction saying, "Rhett, if that's you, I swear to God I'm gonna kill you." I wasn't worried about hunting anymore. I just wanted to know who was messing with me. I get back to where the clearing was, and it wasn't there. It's like the trees just magically grew back, and I was more confused than I had ever been in my life. Whistling from my right this time. At this point, I realize I have no idea where I am. Nothing looks right anymore. If I didn't know any better, I'd say that someone moved all the trees around when I walked away. By that time, I realized that I needed to get out of there. My stomach sank when I realized that, at this time, the sun was in the middle of the sky. I had no way of knowing which way to go. I felt confused and extremely lost. I could hear the whistling coming from behind me again. I started walking in the opposite direction of the whistling, hoping I could get away from whatever was causing it. I walked about 5 minutes when the whistling started coming from in front of me and was getting closer. I remembered I had a gun and stood my ground. I didn't see any other way of getting out of there. I saw only what I can describe as a blurry figure walking towards me. When I say blurry, I mean that it was like my eyes just refused to focus on whatever this thing was walking towards me. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, nothing helped. It was just a black, blurry blob in the form of a human. I fired at it and heard this horrible screech, something I can only describe as microphone feedback, but so loud I thought my eardrums were going to burst. I took off running and just didn't stop. I managed to find a deer trail and started following it. Things started to look familiar at that point, and I started seeing used shotgun shells on the ground. They looked like mine, and when I realized that, I remembered where I was. I followed the deer trail back to the camp, where my dad and grandpa was. When my dad saw me, he started screaming at me, asking where I was and why I hadn't came back to the camp. I asked him what he meant. I had only been gone a few hours, and why were they back so early? I never came back to the camp that night. I had been gone for almost a full day. I decided not to tell them about what happened, mostly because I knew there was no way my dad would believe me. I made up a story that I had gotten lost and just camped out in the woods that night. I wasn't allowed to hunt alone for a while. That night, as we're sitting around the fire, my dad left to answer nature's call, and my grandpa said, "You followed the whistling, didn't you?" Calls from my wife have become odd. Author unknown. Over the last few months, calls from my wife have become odd. Several times, seemingly along no pattern, I have been receiving very strange calls from my wife. I handle our cell billing, so interestingly, I know for a fact that when I get these calls, even though they show as my wife's number, they are not originating from her number. I can't explain what I hear. The first few times it happened, I hung that shit up because it scared the hell out of me. You should understand the level of fear, though, Reddit. I am hanging up on what could be my wife of 16 years in distress. But the sounds I hear over that phone are so foreign and Varelse that my mind can scarcely comprehend. I imagine it's like hearing God's voice. And so the first few times it happened, I hung up and texted my wife a few times. You should note that my texts to her during these times just go to dead space, even when I have full bars. She does not receive them, and after a while, the little red exclamation by the text on my iPhone and the whole text associated disappear. The best I can describe it is the call from Indrid Cold from Mothman Prophecies. That odd sort of static that at the same time sounds like words that I somehow understand. On the third time it happened, I said screw it and listened to the static. I wish I hadn't. I can hardly hear another sound. It sounds like an old dial-up modem, except it formulates words. Terrible words. I'm not even willing to tell you what the voice said, Reddit. But I'm hoping one of you has advice as to what the hell this is, and what the hell I can do. I know we're all supposed to assume this is real. Frankly, I don't give a shit. Upvote, downvote, just please help me. There is something actively screwing with me. I truly hope that I somehow pissed off the phone or cable guy or something, but I doubt it. I'm an atheist and a skeptic, and I truly didn't think this kind of thing was possible a week ago. What do I do? Update tomorrow night. If only so I have somebody who doesn't think I'm crazy to tell about this. I'm a large alpha male, and I have never known this fear. Whatever it is, I don't stand a chance. God, I can feel it watching me now. I'm logging in. I can't see my screen through the tears. Anyway. I would like to give a heartfelt thank you to the special friends of the channel for your overwhelming generosity. If you would like to support the channel, the link is below in the description. Also, please send me your stories and poems
to duchessofdarkness27@gmail.com. You can also find me on Instagram at duchess.ofdarkness and Twitter at duchessofdarkn2. I want to thank all my listeners for your kindness, your encouragement, and your support. It means the world to me. Thank you for joining me. Until next time.